You're on the top of Daf Ayin Zayin Amid Beis. Bekitona de Rav. There was a room next to Rav's base medrash. Rav was standing omed. He didn't bother sitting down like you do in judgment. Yechidi, he was alone. There were no other two members of the tribunal. Ubalayla, and it took place at night. So here we have clear-cut proof that Rav allows Hataras Nedarim even at night. Omer Rabba Rav Nachman Allah Nisholim Nedarim Omed Yechidi Ubalayla. So none of the requirements that apply to Din apply to Hataras Nedarim. Din requires yeshiva. Din requires 3 judges, and it requires Yomi, not Laila. None of these requirements apply to She'elas Nedarim. Not only that, Uba Shabbos, you can be Shoel and Neder on Shabbos, and here's where we learn that we require Litzorach Shabbos. Uba Krovim, obviously in Din, you cannot accept Krovim. Here in She'elas Chacham, you could have a Karo being matir the neder of his Karo. And in the case of 3 Hedyotos, the 3 could be related to each other. And we're going to allow Hataras Nedarim on Shabbos and not penalize him for delaying until Shabbos. Again, it's only in the case of Litzorach Shabbos. Even though he had plenty of opportunity to be shol on his neder before Shabbos, but now he has a tzorach on Shabbos. He didn't take advantage of those opportunities, and nevertheless, we're going to permit Hataras Chacham on Shabbos l'tzorach Shabbos. So this is the opinion of Rabbah in the name of Rav Nachman. Now the Gemara asks the following question: Omed, can you be matir neder while you're standing? Vatanya, we have a story of Rav Gamliel. He was riding a donkey. He was on his way from Akko to Kziv. When he got to Kziv, somebody came to be shol on his neder. And Yorad Rav Gamliel min hachamor. Rav Gamliel got off the donkey, misateh, like a dayan who wraps himself up in a talis. V'yoshav, and he sat down. And then v'yitir lo nidro. So you see that you cannot be matir neder b'mu'umad. That's why Rav Gamliel had to get off the donkey in order to be matir. So for answers, Rav Gamliel Savar. Now here you have a tricky girsa business. We're going to read this with the girsa of Tosfos, which you'll see here if you have the same Gemara as I do on the bottom right, the first of the wide lines, and also the girsa of the Ran, that ein poschin b'charot. Rav Gamliel holds that the only way to be matir neder is with what we call Pesach, but not charot. It's not enough that the noder comes in front of the chacham and he says, you know what, I regret that I took the neder. No, the chacham is going to have to go through an entire lengthy, tedious process of finding a Pesach. He's going to have to interrogate the person. Would you have taken a neder if you would have known X, Y, or Z? In order to create a kind of a toes at the time of the neder, that's called Pesach. And that's mi'aker nidra be'in. We have to find a Pesach that we can be oker the neder mitchilaso, and boy iyune, for such a decision to be made, for the chacham to be able to come up with a Pesach, because ain't posted the charota, that requires a tremendous amount of concentration and investigation, interrogation, and therefore you have to do it b'yeshiva, and that's why Rav Gamliel got off his chamor. But Rav Nachman Sovar, and again we have to change the girsa here, poschim b'charota. We don't need the chacham to investigate, to delve deeply and interrogate the noder. As long as the noder comes in front of the chacham and he says, you know what, I regret this neder, we're going to be matir the neder, therefore, afilu ma'uma, there's no requirement of yeshiva. So that the story of Rav Gamliel is not a contradiction to Rav Nachman, because the two are based on 2 different shittas. Rav Gamliel doesn't allow charata, and therefore it's only Pesach. If it's only Pesach, it requires Iyun, and therefore it requires yeshiva, whereas Rav Nachman holds like that shita, that poschin becharata. Okay. And since poskim charata, therefore you could even do it stand. Amalei Rav Nachman. There was a person who came from Eretz Yisrael. He came in front of the Chachamim in Bavel, and his kakulei Rabbanon Lebreit, and he asked for Ataras Nedarim, and the Rabbanon decided that they would be matir the neder for the son of Rav Huna bar Ovin, Shorolei Nidri. However, even though they were matir the neder of Brei Rav Huna, nevertheless they gave him a Musa Shmut. They ranked him out. Go and ask Rachamim from Hashem, because by taking this neder you sin. And the Ran says the reason why this is called a sin is because the Yerushalmi says Lo dayach masha osra Torah, ela shata osra alecha o dvar macher bi. It should be enough for you that you have all these surim that the Torah imposed upon you, 365 lavin, and now you took upon yourself another isur. That's not acceptable, and therefore you have to be tshuva for that. Now here we have a question of the Binyan Yechezkel. When we found in the Gemara and Divrei Chazal that a noder is called a chote, that's only if he doesn't come in front of the chacham to be shol on his neder. Aval in bol lishol alav, and he wants to do a tikkun, then that's sufficient. We don't call him a chote because he's doing a tikkun. In fact, the Gemara back on Daf Chav Beis said that this was a Pesach. We can say to a noder, had you known that you would be considered a chote, would you have taken the neder? And if he says, no, had I known that, I wouldn't have taken the neder, then we're able to be matir the neder with a Pesach. So we see very clearly that if he comes in front of the Chacham to be matir his neder, then he's not considered a chote. So this is a big to-do and tzorach iyun right now. Tani Rav Dimi Achua de Beisaf, we call it noder afal pishu mekaimo nikra chote. When a person takes a neder and he doesn't come to be matir the neder and he's mekayim the neder, nevertheless, he's still considered a chote. Because once a person starts with the Nedarim, it's a slippery slope. And the Gemara says back on Daf Chav Beis, we quoted it earlier, the name of Shmuel, called a noder afal pishu mekayim nikra rosh. It's like he built a boma and he was makriv a korban on the boma. From whence do we derive this conclusion that a noder is considered a chote? The Torah says, when you cease and desist from taking the darim, then you will not be guilty of sin. We can be medayik from this, that lo chadalta, if you continue in your ways to take the darim, ikachet, that's considered chet. Now the Gemara enters into the question of hafara. What exactly constitutes hafara? What exactly constitutes hakoma? Tanya, we learned in the Brisa. Ha'omer li'isha. A man says to his wife, and he wants to be made for his wife's nedarim. Kol nedarim shetidori, any nedarim that you take now from this point and on, that's called mikan lahava. I'm very upset about all these nedarim. The implication of his statement is that those nedarim that you already took in the past, that's okay. He's not saying anything about the earlier nedarim. Or he says, Ein ze neder, lo omar klum. This is not a lashon hafara. Okay, so at this point, we have to look at the Ran, because what we said is the interpretation of other Rishonim. The Ran says the following, that if he says kol nedarim shetidori, it doesn't mean in the future tense, the way we interpreted it, but rather it's referring to the past tense, to the Nedarim that she already had taken. So he's just saying, you know what, I'm not happy with the Nedarim you took. Or he says alternatively, and now again there's a Girsa issue, and what we should have in the Gemara is Ein Kan Neder. And in those two Lashonos, Lo Omar Klum, this does not qualify as Afar at all. Now, all this is based on a Gemara Brisa that's brought later on in Daf Ayin Tes, and that is that Afar B'Leiv ain't Afar. The Gemara makes a fundamental distinction between Hakama and Afar. Hakama B'Leiv is meaningful, is valid, but not Afar B'Leiv. Now, the Torah requires in Hafara a specific language that's crystal clear that he's being made there. And the EFC is not a Lashon Hafara. So it's not enough that we derive a conclusion from what he did say that he doesn't want the neder. That's not enough. But rather we need a Lashon Bara Mefurash Shel Hafara. And if he says Ein Kan Neder, that's not a Lashon Mefurash. Now, with regard to Hakama, the halach is just the reverse. That is Hakama B'Leiv. Again, this is a sugya later on in Daf Ayin Tes. And therefore, if he uses a language which is not clear, but it's clear that he doesn't want, we're talking about Hakama, that he wants the neder, then Hakama is B'Leiv. We just need to know that he wants to be making the neder. So if he says Yafa Asis, Ein Kemosev, Im Lo Nadark Madirech Ani, in all these three cases, this is an indication that he is very happy with the neder. He says, Yafa Asis, you did well by taking the neder. Or he says, Ein Kemosech, there's no woman like you. You're the most chashuva woman in the world because you took this neder. Or, had you not taken the neder, I would have imposed the neder on you. So in all these three cases, you have a Gili Das that he wants the neder. And that's tantamount to Kiyum HaNeder. Why? Because, as we said, Kiyum B'Libo Kayim. The Gemara Daf on Ayin Tes. That Kiyum Shebelev Havi Kiyum, but Hafara Shebelev Lo Havi Hafara. Hafara requires an explicit language of Hafara. And now we're going to take a look at this Gemara according to the Girsa of the Ran. Tanya Omer Le'ishto Kol Nedarim Shetidori. The Ran's Girsa is that he's talking about Nedarim, not that she had taken in the past, but from now moving forward, Yefshi Shetidori, I don't want these Nedarim, Lo Amar Klum. Why? Because again, this is not a clear-cut language of Hafara. And therefore, Yachal Hafers HaNeder Shenadra Adayin Kol Meshach Yom HaShmir. Afal Pishim Mitok Dvarav Nishma Shenach Lo B'Nedoreo Shenadra Mikvar. The implication here is that he's perfectly happy with the Nedarim that she took already before this moment of time, because again, Kol Nedarim Shetidori is implicit or is explicit that Nikan Lahava. So therefore, it's by implication an indication that he is very happy with the Nedarim that she took in the past. Nevertheless, the Gemara says, or I should say more precisely, the Brisa says that that's not considered Hakama. In other words, even though Hakama B'Leiv Havi Hakama, but nevertheless you need a clear-cut Gili Das that he wants the neder. So what are you saying? Well, he said he doesn't want the nedarim from Kana Lahava. Therefore, by implication, he's okay with the nedarim until now. No. That's already by implication. That's not explicit. And the Gili Das, that's going to tell us what he has in his heart, that he wants the neder, that has to be explicit. Klomar, he says, Af she'ein tzarich lefarish u'mekayim es haneder. He doesn't have to explicitly be Mekayim the Neder, but Gili Das, that he wants the Neder, is sufficient. But nevertheless, it's got to be that he says it in a way. He has to say in a positive way regarding these Nedarim, I'm happy with these Nedarim. But if he didn't say so, just that we can derive it from the fact that he is unhappy mikan lahava, that's not enough Megili Das, it's not mefurash, and therefore it doesn't establish even afara shebelik. Vadayin tzarich bir, but we're still a little confused about this Gemara. Shareim niskavim belibo lekayim. If kim shebelev is enough, and he in fact had kavana belev, so how can you tell me that there's a chisaron if he wasn't megaladai to beferish? We don't even need the gili das. Hakama is chal even belev, and im kim belibo dai v'kach. And here he quotes the Achronim. Shevadei kol shekim belibo shapir dom, ela shekol shelo piresh b'daito shenoach lo b'nedarim elu, ein lanu linkot b'daito shachein noach lo b'hem, v'rotza b'levavu l'kayim. You're right. The kiyum is established b'leiv. The leiv, his decision that he's happy with the neder is enough to be mekayim the neder. But we still need to know what he's thinking in his heart, and that has to be clear. But if he says Yafa Asis, that's already a clear-cut Gili Das, or he says Ein Kamosech, you're the greatest, or he says, he declares in Lonadar Madirechani, I would have imposed this neder on you. That's clearly, those three Lashonos are an explicit Gili Das that he's happy with these Nedarim and Dvar Kayamin, because again, as we said before, Hakama Belev Havi Hakom. Now the Gemara goes back to Hafaras Nedarim on Shabbos. And we established on an Aleph that there is Hafaras Nedarim on Shabbos, but the Brisa says, Lo Yomar Adam Le'ishto B'Shabbos, a person should make a shinui because it's Shabbos. He shouldn't say Mufar Lichi, Bato Lichi, Kederech Shovel B'Chol. This is a little bit of a pagia in Kvod HaShabbos if he uses the same language of Hafara during the week on Shabbos as he does during the week. Ela Omalai should do it with a shinui. Tli v'chli, take the food that you took a neder on and eat it. Tli u'shsi, take the liquid and drink it. V'neder bato me'ela. So he's not explicitly saying, I am destroying the neder. And that's Roy Lishanos Mipnei Kavod HaShabbos. Now, it could be that what the Gemara is interested here is not so much Kavod HaShabbos, but a Gzeira that he might come to be Mata the Neder Alidei Chacham. We want to make a difference here between Afara and Atorah. Because in the case of Atorah, we said that it's got to be L'tzorch Shabbos, otherwise we don't allow Atorah Nedarim on Shabbos. So therefore, if he says Tli v'achli Tli u'shsi, then it's quite clear that it's L'tzorch Shabbos, and therefore, even in the worst case scenario, if he would make a distinction, if he would take a step further and even allow Atorah Nedarim, that would be okay, because it's L'tzorch Shabbos. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. When a person says Tli v'achli, it's not enough that he indicates, well, he doesn't want the neder, he wants her to eat l'kavod Shabbos, but also he has to be mevatel b'leiv. He has to say in his heart, this neder is butter. Again, we're touching here on a whole sugya called bitul b'leiv, whether bitul b'leiv is valid or not. Tanya, we learned in a brisa, Ve'shama yom v'shabbos mevatel b'libo v'chol motzi v'svasav. On Shabbos, it's enough that he says Tli v'achli Tli u'shsi. That's sufficient for Afara, as long as he's mevatel b'libo. And that's not enough b'chol. On a weekday, then motzi b'sfasav, he should say mufer lichi. Now, this is a very impossible line in the Gemara. I'm telling you straight up front, Rabbi. The Gemara says, if you take it literally, that hafara b'leiv havi hafara. That's not so. We saw that over and over again. Hafara requires an explicit and a clear-cut statement of mufer lichi. So what exactly are they still saying over here? That mevata belibo, as if to say bita b'leiv is enough. Tama Haran, the Ran asked the following question: Ech moil hafarazu? How could bita b'leiv be meaningful? Shaninu b'braisa lalon. We have a braisa later on Daf Ayin Ches. Hafara b'leiv eino mo'ila. V'im tirtza lomar shemoel mikoch haloshem tli v'achli tli v'shti. V'chi adif loshem zel kol loshem shali efshi tetidor ein kadneder. We saw already in the Braisa that those Lushonos are not valid, and it's not Hafara. Upir Aran, Sha'af Sheshanin Shafar B'leiv Eino Mo'ila, Hainu Dafrik Shalo Pirish B'piv Klum. I want to make a note of this. This is such an important. Sure enough, I need to find my pencil. I can't find it. Kishemefarish B'piv V'omer L'Tliach V'achli, then Hafara B'leiv is meaningful. So basically, you have here an overlap of A plus B. There's Hafar b'leiv, but there's also Piresh, where he says Tli v'achli. And when we combine Tli v'achli, what he said explicitly, together with this Hafar b'leiv, that's better than if he would use an improper lashon, a lashon garua like efshi shetidar. I don't want you to take Nedarim. Because in those cases, we don't have a clear bit of b'leiv. But here, it's a bit of b'leiv, and not only that, but the words that came out of his mouth clearly indicate that bit of b'leiv. And Beis Hillel will validate that even on a weekday. Rabbi Yochanan, Chacham she'omer b'loshen Baal, u'Baal she'omer b'loshen Chacham lo omer klum. If the Chacham, instead of saying mutalach, mutalichi, said mufarlichi, that's not a valid hataras Chacham. And if a Baal, instead of saying mufarlichi, he said mutalichi lo omer klum. So we see from Rabbi Yochanan there's a fundamental difference between Hafaras Habal and Hataras HaChacham. This Sanya, the Gemara offers a source for Rabbi Yochanan's ruling, and the Brisa is interpreting a pasuk in Parshas Matos, in the Parsha Nedarim, by Daber Moshe El Rashei Matos, with Bnei Yisrael. What do we derive from the two words Zeh Hadover? This is teaching me that the davar, the dibur, has to be very specific. Chacham matir, the chacham will say mutalcha, but einav hal matir. Baal has to say mufarlach. Sheyachal, and if not for this drasha of Zeh Hadover, I would have had a kal v'chomer. Uma chacham sheinu meifir. Matir, a chacham cannot be made for a neder. Only a baal or a father can be made for a neder. Nevertheless, matir is baal, shemeifir, and for that matter, an av as well, einu din shematir. How much more so she should be matir? So logically, we would have come to the conclusion that a baal could be matir his wife's nedarim. Because if he can be Mayfair, and a Chacham cannot be Mayfair, then his power and authority exceeds that of a Chacham, and certainly, therefore, just like the Chacham is Matir, the Baal can be Matir, Talmud Lomer, therefore I need the Pasuk, and here on the top of my Ches, Zeh Chacham Matir v'ein Baal Matir. Okay, then, so this is where we'll stop. And in Mitzvah Hashem tomorrow, we'll begin with Tanya Ida. Wishing you a great day.